7 hardest moments every dark chosen one must endure. There's a reason the path of the dark chosen one is not crowded. It is narrow, silent, often invisible. And unlike the romanticized version of spiritual awakening filled with incense, mantras, and golden light, this path is forged through fire. You don't walk it because you want to. You walk it because you must. Because something ancient pulls you forward. Something in your soul remembers a contract you made long before you were born. And that contract didn't promise comfort. It promised transformation. The kind that scorches illusions, strips away identities, and forces you to meet yourself raw, trembling, real. The first hard moment every dark chosen one must endure is the invisible death. This is the moment when everything around you still looks the same: your job, your relationships, your daily life, but something inside has died. Silently, without announcement. You can't explain it to anyone. You just know that what used to excite you now feels hollow. The beliefs that once gave you stability now feel like cages. It's like waking up in a world where the colors have dimmed, the conversations feel scripted, and you're watching a play you no longer belong in. But here's the paradox: no one else sees the death. They still expect you to perform, to smile, to show up as the you they remember. And you do, for a while, until it becomes unbearable.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
That's when the second hardest moment arrives, the sacred isolation. It's not the kind of loneliness where you simply lack people around you. It's a cosmic loneliness, an exile of the soul. You could be surrounded by friends, family, even lovers, and still feel completely unseen. Not because they're bad people, but because they can't comprehend the depth you now exist in. You're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in the void. And in this void, there's no map, no mentor, no manual, just you, and the silence, and the unbearable weight of your own awakening. This is where most people turn back. They numb, they shrink, they distract. But if you endure it, if you stay in the silence long enough, you begin to hear something deeper. Not words, not thoughts, but truth. And when that truth begins to rise, when you start seeing reality not as you were taught, but as it is, you encounter the third great trial, energetic rejection. Suddenly the world starts pushing you away. People ghost you. Opportunities vanish. You feel like you're being punished for waking up, but you're not. What's happening is energetic mismatch. You're vibrating at a frequency that no longer aligns with the roles, spaces, and people you used to dance with. And because energy is everything, the universe begins to recalibrate your external world to match your internal evolution. But that recalibration feels like loss, like betrayal, like abandonment, and it hurts. Now here's the part no one talks about. After the rejection, after the loss, comes the fourth hardest moment: identity collapse. This is where you realize that every version of you was built to survive a system you no longer participate in. The achiever, the people pleaser, the rebel, the romantic, all of them were masks. And now that you've removed them, you're left with nothing. No label, no role, just presence. And presence, while powerful, is terrifying, because it offers no script to follow. It demands that you live each moment from truth, not programming. And most people have no idea how to do that. So they grasp for old masks. But you're different. You sit in the formlessness. You grieve your own past selves. You let the ashes fall. And in doing so, you make space for something sacred to emerge: authentic selfhood. The you that was buried beneath decades of conditioning. The you that remembers. But before that self can stabilize, there's a fifth initiation: psychic overload. When your awareness expands, so does your sensitivity. You start picking up thoughts that aren't yours, emotions from across the room, collective fear, ancestral grief. the pain of people you haven't even met. You feel like a sponge in a hurricane. And unless you learn to ground, to discern what's yours and what's not, you'll drown in the noise. This is why many chosen ones retreat, not because they hate the world, but because they need to recalibrate their nervous systems to handle the energetic data they're now receiving. And once they do, they return not weaker, but sharper, not colder, but more clear. Let me ask you something right now. Be honest. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by the energy in the room that your body started shaking? Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you were carrying someone else's pain? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with a heaviness that had no name? That's not weirdness, that's awareness, that's your gift activating. But it's also your responsibility. Because when you can feel this much, you must learn how to transmute it. And that leads to the sixth crucible, the temptation to disconnect. After the overload, after the trials, there comes a moment when you'll want to shut it all off, to close your heart, to numb your sensitivity, to say, screw it, I didn't ask for this. And you're right. You didn't. But your soul did. And here's the truth. The world doesn't need more numb people. It doesn't need more perfect people. It needs present people. People who can feel the fire and still choose compassion. People who can hold complexity without needing to control it. And that only comes from staying open, especially when it's hard, especially when it hurts. And finally, we reach the seventh hardest moment, the moment that changes everything, radical surrender. This is when you stop trying to become something and realize you already are. This is when you stop searching for meaning and become the meaning. This is when you realize that the darkness you endured wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And you see clearly, maybe for the first time, that you were never alone, that the pain had purpose, that the isolation created space for revelation, and that your scars are not signs of weakness, they are stamps of initiation, proof that the fire did not consume you, it refined you. The hidden blessings behind every breakdown, how darkness becomes the doorway to power. Most people will spend their lives avoiding breakdowns. They'll shape their identity around the idea of holding it all together, smiling through the pain, performing stability, chasing external validation, just to distract from the trembling within. But dark chosen ones, we don't get that luxury. We are designed to break. And I don't mean that in a hopeless or fatalistic way. I mean it in the most sacred, powerful, alchemical sense. Every breakdown we've endured was not a collapse of who we are, it was the dismantling of who we are not. And when you can see that, when you truly understand the divine architecture behind your darkest hours, everything changes. There is a hidden blessing in every breakdown, but it cannot be accessed from the surface. You have to go under. You have to sit in the ruin, in the ashes of what you thought would last forever, and choose not to run. You have to be willing to feel it all, the grief, the rage, the disillusionment, the confusion, and ask it what it came to teach you. That's the difference between the chosen and the ordinary. We don't just suffer. We alchemize our suffering into wisdom. We look at our pain and say, speak, I'm listening. Because we know that every shadow holds a secret and every silence holds a code. I think about one of your deepest breakdowns. That moment when it felt like everything was falling apart. Maybe it was a betrayal, a heartbreak, a loss, a moment when the ground beneath you disappeared and you were left free-falling with nothing to hold on to. Now look back. What did that moment strip away that needed to go? What illusion did it shatter? What truth did it force you to face? What power did you discover in the process, power you didn't even know you had? There's this myth that spiritual strength comes from light, from peace, from balance. But for us it comes from the void, from the descent, from walking through the underworld of our own psyche and still coming out the other side with our heart intact. That's not weakness. That's warrior energy. And it's not performative. It's quiet. It's real. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And that strength is born in the moments when no one is watching. No audience, no likes, just you and the dark, and the decision to rise anyway. You begin to realize that the breakdown was never about destruction. It was about permission. The universe was saying, you are done living the small version of yourself. Now let me show you what you're really made of. And the only way to access that next version of yourself was to let the old scaffolding collapse. The ego, the roles, the attachments, the false safety, it all had to go. The blessing was hidden in the very thing you were begging to escape. And here's where it gets even deeper. The more you surrender to the breakdown, the more your inner senses sharpen. You start seeing through people, through systems, through your own projections. You develop an intuitive clarity that can only be earned through suffering, not because pain is holy, but because what you do with pain reveals your true essence. And once you've walked through fire and found peace inside it, you become untouchable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you're no longer afraid of being tested. That's the hidden blessing. You stop fearing the dark. You stop resisting discomfort. You stop needing external validation to feel worthy. You stop chasing purpose and realize you are the purpose. You are the cosmic experiment of what happens when a soul remembers itself through darkness. And that remembrance gives you a kind of power no one can fake. It's not the power of dominance. It's the power of presence, of walking into a room and shifting the energy without saying a word, of being the calm in someone else's chaos, of carrying ancient wisdom in your eyes because you earned it through lifetimes of inner war. So, let me ask you something real. When was the last time you truly thanked your past breakdowns? Not just tolerated them, not just survived them, but honored them. What would it look like to see every dark night of your soul not as a detour, but as a divine classroom? A place where your higher self was carved out by the chisel of pain. Because the moment you do that, the moment you stop running from the shadow and instead shake its hand, you become the very thing the world is waiting for. A fully integrated being. Someone who has seen the worst and still chooses the best. Someone who has walked through their own hell and came back not bitter, but wise. That wisdom is your gift. That power is your responsibility. And the world needs it now more than ever. The warrior's choice when the world tries to silence you, but you speak anyway. There comes a point on the dark chosen one's path where the silence becomes louder than the noise. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that presses down on your throat, on your chest, on your truth. The kind that comes not from stillness, but from suppression. You see, once you've walked through your breakdowns, once you've alchemized your pain into presence, the world will begin to test you in a new way. It will say, now that you remember who you are, will you still dare to speak? Because the truth is, the system, whether it's society, culture, family, or even spiritual communities, was never built to hold the full voice of an awakened being. It was designed to reward conformity, obedience, and silence masquerading as peace. But the dark chosen one, we were never meant to conform. We were born to disrupt. Not for the sake of rebellion, but for the sake of truth. And truth is not always gentle. It's not always palatable. Sometimes it shakes the ground. Sometimes it burns bridges. Sometimes it offends everyone in the room. But it heals. It liberates. And when you have seen what we've seen, when your eyes have been opened by fire, you come to a point where staying silent becomes a deeper betrayal than being rejected. It's not easy. The moment you begin to speak your truth, especially after coming out of your shadows, you'll feel exposed, vulnerable, like you're standing naked in front of a crowd that's waiting to throw stones. And in many ways you are. Because the world doesn't just challenge people's words, it challenges their energy. You'll trigger people without saying a thing. just by being, just by standing in the frequency of authenticity when others are still clinging to performance. You'll feel the tension, the subtle resistance, the attempt to shrink you back down into the version of yourself that made others comfortable. And this is where the warrior is born. Because to be a true spiritual warrior is not about swords or shields. It's about voice. It's about choosing to speak when everything in you says, stay safe. It's about honoring your intuition, even when it goes against logic, tradition, or popularity. It's about being willing to be misunderstood, misjudged, even mocked, because you know that your soul didn't come here to be light. It came here to be real. And the moment you choose realness over approval, the game changes. You stop operating from fear. You stop compromising your message to fit into someone else's mold. You speak from the center of your being, even if your voice shakes. And eventually, it stops shaking. It grows. It deepens. It becomes a channel not just for your words, but for the collective truth that others are still afraid to name. You become a mirror, a frequency holder, a permission slip for others to rise. But here's the part no one tells you. When you start speaking truth, especially as a dark chosen one, you don't just liberate others, you agitate them. Because truth disrupts illusions, and people are deeply attached to their illusions. They built entire identities around them. So when you show up with clarity, with conviction, with presence, it threatens the very foundation of their comfort zone. And they'll project. They'll resist. They'll say things like, you've changed. But you didn't change. You just revealed. And that revelation is your power. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. How many times have you swallowed your truth to avoid discomfort? How many times have you played small just to make others feel big? And what would your life look like if you stopped doing that completely? Not someday, not when it's safe, but now. Because here's what I've learned. Your voice is not just for you. It's a vehicle for collective healing. Every time you speak truth, even if it's messy, even if it's unpopular, you tear a hole in the fabric of illusion. You make space for someone else to breathe deeper, to question, to remember. That's why the world tries so hard to silence you. Not because your voice is weak, but because it's dangerous. Dangerous to systems built on deception. Dangerous to relationships built on codependency. Dangerous to internal prisons that people don't even know they're living in. And yet we must speak, not from ego, not to be right, but from alignment, from soul, from that sacred place within where you know, even if no one agrees, that what you're saying carries the vibration of truth. That knowing is unshakable. And once you find it, once you let it anchor in your body, no amount of rejection can stop you. You become unstoppable not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. And clarity is magnetic. It pulls real people, real opportunities, real shifts toward you. So speak. Speak when it's inconvenient. Speak when it's terrifying. Speak when your whole nervous system wants to hide. Because every time you do, you reclaim yourself. You reclaim the parts of you that were silenced as a child, that were invalidated by society, that were buried under years of pretending. And when you reclaim yourself, you reclaim your mission. This is the warrior's choice, to rise not through violence, but through vibration. To fight not with swords, but with sovereignty. To lead not with force, but with frequency. And the world may resist, but it will remember you. Because those who speak truth in the dark don't just echo, they awaken. The return of the real ons, how to walk the world after you've transcended it. There is a strange and sacred moment in every dark chosen one's journey when you've gone so deep into yourself, so far beyond the illusions of this world, that returning feels almost impossible. You've tasted the truth beneath the noise, stood in the rawness of your own soul, and touched a stillness that the world rarely makes space for. It changes you, irrevocably. And yet, even after all that awakening, all that shedding and remembering, Life doesn't let you sit on a mountaintop forever. Eventually, you are called to return. Back into the noise. Back into the system. Back into the places you once left behind, but not as who you were, as who you've become. And that return, that's the final initiation. Because walking the world after you've transcended it is a delicate, often brutal paradox. You see through everything, every performance, every projection, every power game. You recognize how artificial so much of modern life is, how people carry wounds disguised as personalities, how most conversations are rehearsed scripts, not real connections. And yet you're still here, breathing, living, interacting, paying bills, holding space in a world that teaches disconnection and calls it success. So what do you do with that awareness? How do you move through a world you no longer belong to? You become the bridge, not the preacher, not the savior. The bridge, the living proof that it's possible to remember your truth and still function, still create, still connect. But not from the old self, from the real self. The self that doesn't need validation to feel worthy. The self that isn't trying to win but to resonate. You become the one who can sit in a meeting and feel the energy underneath the words. The one who can walk down a crowded street and sense the pain behind the smiles. The one who no longer needs to escape the world because you've found a way to hold your frequency within it. But this return comes with its own cost. You will look around and realize that most people are still asleep, still playing roles, still running from the very shadows you've embraced. And it can be tempting to judge, to disconnect, to retreat again into solitude. But that's not why you came back. You return not to fit in but to anchor, to hold a vibration that others can feel even if they don't understand it, to be the calm when others spiral, to be the depth in a shallow room, to be the one who doesn't flinch when truth walks in. And here's the hardest part, no one will applaud you for it. There won't be fireworks. No one will hand you a trophy for healing your lineage, for transmuting ancestral patterns, for speaking truth when your voice trembled. Most won't even notice, but you'll know, your body will know, your soul will rest easier, because you'll be walking aligned. And alignment is the only real reward. Let me ask you something right now. What would it look like if you stopped waiting for the world to understand you and just lived as if you were already free? What would shift if you stopped translating your truth into smaller words just to be digestible? What would change if you stopped dimming your light just to make others comfortable in their shadows? Because here's the secret, the real ones never truly fit in. We reshape the spaces we enter. We don't force it, we don't demand it, we simply be. And our being creates ripples. It plants seeds. It reminds others subtly, soulfully that they too are more than the role they've been playing. And that is the quiet revolution. Not external chaos, internal clarity, not louder noise, deeper resonance. You have walked through the void. You have sat in the silence. You have died 1,000 ego deaths and emerged more you than ever before. Now the question is, will you walk this world as a ghost of who you were or as the embodied truth of who you are? The return of the real ons is not a dramatic entrance. It's a vibration, a presence, a quiet frequency that says, I remember who I am and I see who you are too even if you've forgotten. So walk, not with pride but with presence, not with fear but with frequency, because the ones who've seen the dark and still choose the light are the ones who illuminate the path for everyone else. And the world has never needed that more than it does right now.